In this video, I want to continue on with my equipment series where I go through the rod, reel, and line that I like for specific techniques. Now, in this video, I want to talk about topwaters. Topwaters are one of my absolute favorite techniques out there. This rod, reel, and line actually have a number of these because I use this rod for a number of different topwater baits. Not only spook style baits like you see here, but poppers and wake baits and prop baits and smaller whopper ploppers. I use this rod and reel for a lot of different baits. So we're gonna go through my system for it and why I think it is really, really good. Now, before we get into the video, this one's brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. Right now at Fin Fishing, for just another week, if you buy a USA made sun shirt, you actually get a free American Bass t-shirt. This is a tri-blend t-shirt. It's worth 20 bucks, but right now it is free with the purchase of a sun shirt. So all you got to do, add the sun shirt in the size that you like to cart, add the size of the t-shirt that you like to cart. It will automatically discount at checkout. Also, I just got a new shipment of probably one of the most popular products that I've ever had on the website, which is the Fin Fishing sun gloves. Just got a new shipment in, so I have a lot of the sizes and they're back in stock. So anyways, shopping at Fin Fishing is surely the best way to help support the channel, and I greatly appreciate it, guys. All right, let's talk about topwaters. Like I said, I love topwaters. I've always loved topwaters. There's not many times where I go fishing where I do not have this specific rod reel combo on the front deck of my boat. Like, I use this for absolutely like almost every situation, except for maybe like really, really cold water. Now, let's talk about the specifics. So let's go through the rod. I have used a lot of different rods over the years when it comes to topwaters. And I have always really liked a very parabolic bending rod anytime that I'm using a treble hooked bait. So whether that's a crankbait, a jerk bait, a topwater, I really like a more parabolic bending rod. Now, with that being said, when it comes to a lot of crankbaits, I personally like a composite rod. It is a half graphite, half glass rod. The only problem with a composite rod when you are using it for baits like a topwater or even a jerk bait is that you are really working a topwater a lot with your hand. I mean, a spook style bait, it is pop, 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 pop constantly all the way back to the boat. Now, with that being said, the ARC composite rods are very light, but they are not as light as a graphite rod. So over the years, I have gone from using almost a full glass rod to a composite rod to a parabolic bending graphite rod. And the biggest reason is that I really like to have that lighter rod because I'm constantly working that bait. Now this right here is an ARC Invoker Pro rod. It is a 7-foot 2-inch, and the action is labeled on this rod as a regular bend, which is kind of like ARC's version of a moderate bend. Like I said, moderate bending rods, whenever you are using treble hooks, even if you are using giant baits like a glide bait, I like to have that moderate, that parabolic bending rod. It is very important for you to be able to hook up with fish and keep fish pinned. So this rod right here, I use this a ton. It is a great rod. It is light as a feather. It is literally like an extension of my arm when I'm out there. Now, I want to talk specifically about the length because kind of like I said with lengths of rods, I've used a lot of different lengths with my topwaters. 7-foot 2-inch to me is the perfect all-around topwater rod because I use topwaters for a number of different situations. I use them a lot where I'm making a long bomb cast, maybe across the point, across the grass flat, whatever it may be, and I'm working that bait all the way back to the boat. I also use topwaters a lot, for example, like prop baits and popper baits, where I'm really kind of target casting them. I'm fishing it under an overhanging tree or around a dock where I'm really pinpoint casting it. Now, typically the shorter the rod is, the little bit more pinpoint accuracy you're going to have. But I don't want to use a 6-foot 9-inch rod if I'm fishing offshore and I'm making these, 60, well, probably not 60 yards, probably 40 or 50 yard long cast across the major point. I like to have a little bit of length to give me a longer cast and a little bit better on the hookup. So that's why I really like that 7-foot 2-inch. I think anything between 7 foot and 7'2" is probably about perfect when it comes to topwater. Now, let's talk about the reel. The reel is, the biggest thing with the reel is you want to make sure you have a great casting reel. You want to have like one that can cast very, very far. I've been a humongous fan of the ARC gravity reels. This is the G5 reel. So I think it's like $170, which I feel like is kind of the mean price of like a quality reel. And this thing, I'm telling you, this is the best like casting reel that I've ever picked up. And I'm not, you can take that for what you please. I've used all the different brands out there. I really think that this is one of the best casting reels, mostly because the brakes are a little bit different on this reel, but I don't want to bore you guys with all the intimate details of it. The big thing though, when it comes to the reel is the gear ratio. You want to have a high gear ratio, at least 7.1 or higher. You know, even using an 8 or even higher is okay with your topwaters. One of the biggest reasons that I really like to have a high gear ratio reel with my topwaters is there are times throughout the summer where you are casting at breaking fish. You know, you have a fish that blows up and you need to get on that fish as quickly as you can. So if your lure is, 30 yards out over this way and you have a bass bust over here that's 20 or 30 yards away, you got to be able to pick that line up as quick as you can and fire it over to that fish. And literally the difference between a low gear ratio reel and a very high gear ratio reel can mean the difference between you catching that breaking fish. Now, when it comes to versatility, I use this a lot with baits like a smaller whopper plopper. Like I'll use a 90 size whopper plopper a lot, which is their smaller one. When it comes to like the mid-size to big whopper ploppers, I actually like a different rod. But I like this rod for whopper ploppers, those small whopper ploppers. I don't like a very fast gear ratio when I'm whopper plopper fishing, like nothing over 8. A 7 is really perfect to me when it comes to the whopper ploppers, just kind of the way that I like to reel it. So that's what's on this one. This is a 7.1, but a 7.1 or an 8.1 to 1 gear ratio will work really, really well. Now, let's talk about what I think is probably one of the most important parts of this system, which is the line configuration. And I think that there's really two different line systems that you can use as an angler. For me, I really like to have a braid to leader. And the reason that I'm saying leader is because I use such a small leader on my topwaters. As you can see right here, you should be able to see that that's about a foot, and that's about the longest that I will go. So it actually doesn't matter whether you use monofilament or fluorocarbon when you have a short leader like this, because if it's fluorocarbon, it's not enough weight to drag that bait down. It's not going to impact the action. So I still do use monofilament, but the biggest reason that I like to have a small leader here is if you use straight braid to baits like a popper or a walking bait, you will have a lot of times where you make a cast and that hook, the braid will actually get hooked onto that front hook, and it can literally just, it can waste a cast. You can make this long cast, you get it way out there and you start to walk the bait and it's not walking because the braid is looped around that front hook. That's really, really frustrating. So all I do is add a really small leader. Like you can see, I've used 6 inches before. It's simply to help keep the braid away from that front treble. Doing it this way really helps you, and you can tie whatever, braid to leader knot that you want. Because this never gets into my guides and I'm very fast at tying a Crazy Alberto, that's usually what I use. This is a Crazy Alberto. I can tie it really fast in 4-foot waves when it's windy. If this was getting into my reel and through my guides, then I like the FG knot, but it's not in this case, and I'm a little bit faster with the Crazy Alberto. So this is 30-pound braid to a 20-pound monofilament leader. 20 pound. I know that might sound a little bit heavy, a little bit overkill. but I have not had issues catching spotted bass, smallmouth, largemouth with 20 pound. You can go down a little bit if you want. I wouldn't suggest going down below 15, but I really like 20 pound. The other thing when it comes to braided line, and take this however you want, but I am just not the biggest fan of really high carrier braids. So braids that have a 7 or 8 or 9 carrier braid, which means there's 9 different strands woven together. I'm not the biggest fan of those reels, especially with topwaters, because I used them for a little while, for like 2 years. I tried to make it work, and often I would go to wing that cast out there at a breaking fish or just make a long bomb cast, and it would like completely not blow up, but the line would dig into my reel and it would get caught. And sometimes it was like bad, where it's like, okay, I'm setting that rod down for the rest of the night bad. So I like your good old standard Power Pro 4-strand braid on this. It's a more rigid braid, but I really like it. Like, ask any of the guys that I fish with regularly, and I will tell you that I like that 4-strand Power Pro better than most braided lines. So that is the system. One other thing that I wanted to say is that some guys definitely like to fish straight mono when it comes to their topwaters, and I'm okay with that. I do think that using straight mono probably helps you to lose a little bit less fish than using even a braid to mono. Just because braid does have zero stretch, and even though I'm using a very parabolic bending rod, sometimes, especially smallmouth, will just go crazy. And I felt like if I was using mono in some situations, I may have caught those fish because mono does have such a big stretch to it. The big thing with mono, if you're gonna use straight mono, is that you need to make sure you have the rod that kind of suits mono, which means you might need to go with a little bit more of a fast action rod. If it's too whippy and you have mono, you know, if it's a very parabolic bending rod and you have mono, it's almost too much give and you won't get a good hook in that fish. So that's just what I would suggest, but personally, I prefer the braid. I think that where the braid makes up for maybe a couple lost fish is actually on the hookup. I think that at times, if you make a long cast with mono, it can be a little bit more difficult to get a good hook in that fish at a distance. So there's kind of a give and take there. I think it's a double-edged sword where you're probably good either way, if that makes sense. So that's the topwater combo. I use it for basically all my treble hooked topwaters except for bigger topwaters or bigger plopper style baits. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out Fin Fishing, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.